Why does the Western media appear to hate President Maduro of Venezuela? Hardly a week goes by without some criticism of his leadership, an accusation of fraud, or a general negativity about his administration. However, the Venezuelans themselves appear to find him very popular. Venezuela's opposition was predicted by the international media to be heading for great gains in the elections. Yet the government party, led by President Maduro, won the overwhelming majority of the 23 governorships, with the opposition coming nowhere near to taking any kind of majority in these elections. Yet the international press, and in particular the elements which are based in the United States, but including outlets in the United Kingdom and elsewhere, appear unable to cope with this profound vote of confidence in Maduro and his team. The President of Venezuela has even spoken publicly of his frustration over the biased reporting about his country. The Washington Post predicted Venezuela's latest elections are likely to trigger a regional migration crisis. Their dramatic analysis that the elections were neither free nor fair might be supported by the opposition parties in Venezuela, but the wider population there has not shown any collective concern about the outcome and has continued with daily life, accepting the result as valid and reflecting the true mood of the people, despite the economic hardships they currently face. Why is America so interested in the election results of Venezuela? And why is a country as oil-rich as Venezuela suffering such an economic crisis? Simple questions with important answers. And let's start with this. Why is it that the international press, especially those elements based in the United States, are having such difficulty and such reluctance to accept the outcome of recent Venezuelan elections? We asked the public in America and in Venezuela.
I think people were horrified across the world as to the outcomes of this election. I think it was, and I think that is reflected by the attitude of the foreign press.
I don't think they're reluctant. I think that there was some evidence of maybe some wrongdoing, and so they're investigating.
I think the elections results have been accepted by most of the press.
Because they want to hold on to power. They want to grasp all of this. Because we've got the resources and everything here is all right. There are no problems at all. Each one must make their own decisions and they want to grab it as if there was something to give away. So they can give it away as they've done with other countries.
It is not convenient for them for the truth to be known about a country building an alternative model of democracy, presenting a model of true democracy where the people are the main players, where the people make their own decisions, unlike the US, where Donald Trump loses the elections and still remains as the president.
Foreign press, especially the US press, have never recognized the Venezuelan people's will, even when the people in the past have fought for their independence, and once again now the people are fighting for their sovereignty and for democracy. This is not what they want. What they want is to have us subordinate and enslaved to their will. For that reason, the corporate press does not tell the truth, because it's not about the truth, it's about the great corporations and what they say is the truth.
I think the problem they have at the moment is that they cannot accept the fact that the Chavistas exist. What do I mean by this? If you see the covers of all the international media, including the US media, you will see that you will only see the opposition, and especially in the last 6 to 7 months. Only the opposition, the demonstrations, the protests, the statements, as if the Chavistas had been confined to some kind of cyber media catacombs where they don't exist. When they come out to vote, they don't understand what's happened here. And that is the problem they have. At the same time, it was possible that the Chavistas may recover from the 2015 defeat during the National Assembly elections. And some polls, even though they have not been published, suggested that the Chavistas could do particularly well because they haven't lost their own constituency, which means that in order to prevent that from happening, they decided to ignored what was happening and decided that it was going to be fraud and it was going to be rigged. So, in that I understand why they do that, because they were afraid that the Chavistas would come out and vote.
I think the US media have, for many, many years now, waged a pretty brazen war against the Venezuelan government. They've taken on the narrative of the opposition in Venezuela and misreported events in Venezuela. They have really a dereliction of duty, I would call what they've done to their readers. They say there's a dictatorship in Venezuela, yet there have been 23 national elections and referendum. I was an international electoral observer at the most recent regional elections, and in the state that I visited, the opposition won with just over 63%. So it's a very funny dictatorship where opposition forces are winning. And it's not just the US media, we see it in the English language media and the Australian media, and it's not just the conservative media, you see it in the so-called liberal left media where Venezuela is open called a dictatorship. So there's a real problem there for journalists, and the viewers and readers deserve better.
The Spanish government violently attacked its own people for wanting to vote, and America said nothing. The Venezuelan people peacefully exercised their vote, and America criticized and attacked the Venezuelan government. Why, in the view of the Venezuelan and American public, is there such a difference of treatment by America when it comes to Spain versus Venezuela?
Pretty obvious, isn't it? Spain is a very first world country, a great friend, like most European countries we're good friends to the United States, and we depend on the United States, and the United States depends on that relationship and that good relationship between European countries.
The history between the United States and Latin America is a really ugly one, and the United States has interfered a lot. So for them to come out and defend come out and speak out against that, they would have to, they risk addressing their own wrongdoing to those countries, so.
I'm not sure. I know Venezuela is pretty much ruled by a dictator, I think, now, and he really has tried to keep the people down, I think. Whereas in Spain, you're talking about the succession of that region in Spain. As far as I saw last, those were all peaceful demonstrations, and they voted on it, right?
It's something to laugh about. Rajoy Sanchez, whom is called the Trumpet's Nose, as the Colombian people call him, and Almagro, they are in charge of this operation. They are the dogs, the lap dogs, as the ladies would say back in the day, the farm dogs that would go after the woman's skirt. They are the lapdogs of the USA, of Trump, of their actual president, a president who obtained 1 million votes less than his opponent to become president.
Because Rajoy is attempting a disguised coup against the Catalan government, right? This conflict is not recent. It comes from the Middle Ages.
The attitude of Rajoy is aligned with the USA, because they are lackeys also. How would Rajoy talk about Venezuela if the Catalan people just want their freedom? Because if he talks bad about Venezuela, saying there's no freedom of expression and freedom of elections, but we've had over 20 elections and he won't even grant freedom to the Catalan people, that's asking for it. What morality does he have to talk about Venezuela?
Because this is a political decision taken by the media, right-wing media, and also support the opposition in Venezuela. Basically, they totally ignore what happened in Catalonia. Independent of what you think about independence vote or not, that's a completely different matter. The fact that they were repressed and they were badly beaten has not been taken into account. Whereas in the case of Venezuela, what I was as an observer, and I saw a peaceful democratic process, they decided to ignore it precisely because it was a peaceful and democratic process. And they can't afford to recognize that, because by recognizing that, they were admitting that the opposition was wrong in questioning these elections. I was there, I was in Lara State in the northwest of the country. I was up from 5 o'clock in the morning until 6 o'clock in the evening. From the moment they opened until the moment they closed, everything was peaceful. The local governor who lost the election, who was from the opposition, recognized his defeat, and it was totally democratic. And they cannot accept that because they would be admitting defeat. And the US and the right wing do not want to admit defeat.
Again, I mean, the reaction of the US government to events in Spain And when we compare that to Venezuela, exposes their hypocrisy when it comes to any type of credibility that they have when talking about human rights and democracy. It's clear that the US only criticizes those governments that it considers threats to their imperial pretensions, whether it be in Latin America or anywhere in the world. Those that it considered allies, such as Saudi Arabia, Spain, Britain, can literally get away with murder. So I think, once again, the reaction of the US government with the Spanish elections as compared to the Venezuelan elections just exposes the bankruptcy of its position with regards to human rights, democracy, and caring for the welfare of people in these countries.
Venezuela, whose embassy in the United Kingdom is here in central London, is oil rich. So why is it suffering such a serious economic crisis? We asked the public in Venezuela and in the United States.
Oh, corruption. The government is corrupt, from what I understand. That's why. That's exactly why.
Because the government there that took over and their economic policies were wrong, and they enforced them. They were authoritarian government, so they just enforced them the way they wanted to, and they wrecked the entire economy, and now people there don't have access to basic food, water, and medicine. It's very sad.
The crisis is created by the US. It's not the government's fault. It's the US politicians' fault. They are useless.
This is normal. The crisis is not from Venezuela, it is global. And if we are unaware, we will have a water crisis because there are countries that don't have any water at all. So we must take care of our rivers and take care of those who, through some sort of mechanism, try to steal our water from us. It's not only our oil, our diamonds, or our bauxite, our coltan. They try to find ways to steal all these things from us, as they did with the Arab nations. They would like to do in Venezuela.
They don't recognise the free people. They've never recognised the free people and suffering people. And now they're coming out as they did before 200 years ago, as if Venezuela is a colony and all the resources of that colony should be taken, stolen and distributed between the puppets that have always been around in the world. The blockade we are suffering is for the oil, because we all know what the US intentions are. When they say they will help the country, we really know what they're going to do, and it's destroy it, not help it. We have the resources which we know they want, because our oil will reach them in 5 days, while it takes 5 months from the Middle East.
There's been some mismanagement of the economy, that's for sure. They have in place this exchange control, which is damaging the economy because it's creating a thriving black market, which is increasing inflation. That has got to be corrected, and many people who support the government would like that to change. Also, there's been a lot of boycotts from sort of food supplying companies. They have discovered secret warehouses where food had been kept, something which some people like that did in Allende's Chile in 1973, just before the coup. It's a strategy they use. You provoke shortages, you provoke, sort of unhappiness among the population, and then you justify the coup. That's what's happening in Venezuela. In Venezuela, what's happening is that there's been this element, but also levels of mismanagement of the economy. And don't forget that Maduro had to face low oil prices, and that has affected the economy. There's a lot of factors that have influence in the situation at the moment, but they are getting out of this situation slowly and bit by bit.
I think it's important to be very clear that the economic crisis in Venezuela is very real and is affecting large sectors of the population who have seen a serious decline in their living conditions. During the first decade, at least, of Chavismo, there were very significant successes in poverty reduction, in increasing education, health opportunities to mass sectors of the population. Recently, with the drastic fall in oil revenues, which the economy is highly dependent on, that has no doubt played a major part. The foreign media would like to present the economic crisis in Venezuela as purely the fault of the government, when there are a range of political factors, as well as the opposition, the economic war against the country, both domestically and externally by actors such as the US government. So I think it's a much more complex version than the two-dimensional version that the foreign media like to present.
Over 18 million Venezuelans were eligible to vote. Despite predictions of electoral gains for the opposition, they won only about 5 of the governorships in the country, with one governorship still disputed. President Maduro's party secured an overwhelming 17. Although the results varied by region, recent opinion polls have shown Maduro at around 59% of the polls, with the opposition on around 31%.
Opposition groups in Venezuela are constantly appealing to the United States to interfere and help remove the Venezuelan president. Why, in the view of the Venezuelan and American public, are these opposition groups so keen to invite America to interfere in their own country's internal affairs?
I think probably mostly because they know that there's great power in the United States. The United States is one of the world's leading powers, and I imagine that it's because they want that power behind their cause.
Because, you know, when we intervene, we usually get our result, you know, more times than not. And so I think it's only a matter of time before the U.S. maybe sees some interest in Venezuela that would be in their better interest, and, you know, maybe we will intervene.
It's just like it's strategy, honestly. I don't think it's because people have like any warm feelings towards the United States. I think it's because it just makes strategic sense.
Once again, a whole bunch of premises I don't agree with, but the people of Venezuela, I think, are having very hard economic times and are probably thinking about changing their government.
Because they want to become the owners of the country, so they can rule us as they please and create more misery and more poverty.
They are stateless. They don't feel our homeland in their skin, in their blood, in their guts, as the President Chavez said. It must be felt. Our homeland must be felt. You have to feel it. You have to love it. You have to defend it.
The USA and the corporations that rule over there, the war millionaires, are using sabotage, and the people know this. They are here, this revolutionary process, and they're trying to sabotage it.
Because of the black gold, and we are rich in gold, diamonds, metals, anything you may think about that God may have put in nature, Venezuela has it. Venezuela is a rich country, immensely rich. We have allowed them to steal from us little by little.
The USA is a failing empire that needs natural resources of this part of the world, and they cannot allow what they call their backyard to get out of control. They cannot foresee themselves without these natural resources, therefore they must attack. You can see that they do not love Venezuela. If a person loves his country, how would he ask for an invasion? How would he ask them to intervene? We, the Venezuelan people, will resolve what happens inside Venezuela. We don't need them to give us lessons because we are prepared and we are going to defend our oil, which is our most precious resource.
They are determined to use the US because they haven't got any other support within the country. They don't represent the majority of Venezuelans. If you see the recent votes, you will see that they do not represent the majority of Venezuelans, and they need that support because they can't do it by themselves. They have failed in their attempts to call the military to cause a coup. They have failed in the violent demonstrations in the streets of Caracas and the big cities in Venezuela. The Constituent Assembly and the elections neutralized these violent protests. They participated in the elections and they lost in many ways because they lost many governorships, and this proved that there was no fraud. So they need somebody bigger than they are to help them come out of the mess. They are deeply divided between those pragmatists who think that they should fight the government in the ballot boxes and those who want to fight them in the streets. And that division has enabled them to, makes it very difficult for them to come out with some practical solutions. That's why they need Big Brother, the states, to help them come out of a mess they are in at the moment.
I think the Venezuelan opposition have proved incapable of being a responsible opposition ever since they incited a coup and basically enacted, with the US government support, coup against Chavez in 2002. They have been desperate for regime change in the country and not willing to engage in the day-to-day building of alliances and normal political practice that you'd get from an opposition in another country, to such an extent that a few months ago the radical insurgent elements within the opposition came to the fore and spearheaded attempts to violently overthrow the government and use mass violence, which involved the lynching of people considered Chavistas. So they really it's incumbent on them to take a step back and moderate their positions to try and win the next presidential election in a fair manner.
America has a long history of supporting brutal dictatorships in Latin America, from General Pinochet to Manuel Noriega. Why is America now so concerned about democracy in Venezuela? We put that to the American and the Venezuelan public.
I don't think they're concerned with democracy. I think it's all about politics and what the U.S. can gain from a country.
It's about oil, and we need to go more towards renewable. I mean, for all of for people throughout the world, we need to get rid of energy that's fossil fueled and go more solar and wind. I think most Americans want that. People are afraid of change, though, whether you're an American or from Venezuela or from Spain. We're just afraid of change, but that's what we have to keep on pushing forward, and with being progressive. And most Americans are wonderful.
Once again, I'm sure it's interesting. I'm sure it has to do with Venezuela's oil, knowing how the U.S. operates. So yeah,
Our interests were being served by supporting dictators.
They've never been concerned. They just want the power to use Venezuela as if it was their toy or something like that.
Here is a country that knows that a revolution is a daily practice. A revolution is to prepare oneself every day. A revolution is to give away without looking to whom. A revolution is to give your own life away for your homeland. We will win because we will. Both good man and woman will defend our homeland at whatever cost.
It's a matter of interest, as they call it, the Roosevelt Corollary, the Monroe Doctrine. America is for the US citizens, because they even kept the term American for themselves. Americans are all the people from Alaska to the south of Patagonia.
They worry because they have no more puppets in this country to make their bidding. Maduro is no US ambassador, nor was Chavez. We are the revolutionary people of Bolivar, the people of Zamora, the people of Chavez.
First of all, Venezuela has the biggest oil reserves in the world. The US always wants to control this, especially because of the situation at the moment in the fracking industry, which is going down, and all that one. Second, Venezuela is a bad example for all the countries in Latin America when people may be tempted to vote for left-wing governments. We know that the left is in a bit of a problem at the moment in Latin America, but it's still quite thriving in Ecuador, in Bolivia, and also in Nicaragua. So they are worried that this could create more problems within the area of influence, which is the backyard as they consider Latin America. But at the same time, they really realize that many people still support the government in Venezuela, and therefore they want to prevent that from becoming, a bad example for other countries in the region. That's one of the reasons why they are doing that. But the biggest reserves of oil are the main problem for the US, and they want to have a friendly government which will control that and benefit the US with these reserves.
I think if you were to believe that the US government is concerned about democracy in Venezuela, you would be spectacularly naive. If you look at the history of Latin America, you will see that the US government has engaged in a war on democracy, whether it be the support for the fascist dictatorship of Augusto Pinochet and the overthrow of the democratically elected government of Salvador Allende, to more recently its support for the far-right fascist Álvaro Uribe in Colombia, which it armed to the tune of billions, even though the government of Uribe presided over mass massacres of civilians. So to believe that the US has any concern for human rights, democracy, or peace in the region is, at best, spectacularly naive.
Despite the evidence of the polls indicating President Maduro's continuing popularity in his own country, the media outside Venezuela, especially those outlets with strong American links, seem determined to question and accuse him in a way which strikes many commentators as both unusual and unacceptable, given these elections are the internal affair of Venezuela rather than Washington.
Venezuela has one of the most foolproof and robust electoral systems in the world. President Maduro clearly has an electoral mandate to govern, and yet America still seems to resist this political reality. Ironic indeed, considering that as things stand, President Maduro seems to have a more popular mandate in his country than Donald Trump has in his.